The steady drip of information that's now being publicized as part of the Russia investigation apparently has some Republican members of Congress concerned. So as a result, they would like to do away with some of the resources that are being allocated toward that investigation. Case in point, Representative Ron DeSantis, who is pushing for an amendment to curtail Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian collusion. Now, DeSantis has put forward a provision that would halt funding for Mueller's probe 6 months after the amendment's passage. So it would limit the amount of time that the investigation could take place. It also would prohibit Mueller from investigating matters that occurred before June of 2015 when Trump launched his presidential campaign. Now, that's a little problematic because one of the concerns is that Trump may have worked on some sort of financial deal with Russian officials, and obviously that would have an impact, that would matter. There would be a huge issue there, right? Conflict of interest with his businesses. Who knows what could turn up? But they want to, again, limit the scope of this investigation. And the fact that they're trying to protect Trump is a little concerning. DeSantis said that the order appointing Mueller as special counsel, quote, didn't identify a crime to be investigated and practically invites a fishing expedition. He says that Congress should use its spending power to clarify the scope and limit the duration of this investigation.
And these are things that I'm sure DeSantis could not stop saying when Kenneth Starr was investigating Bill Clinton in Whitewater. I mean, it's like these are quotes from Ron DeSantis, then not even a congressman, saying these exact things. This is ridiculous. This is the most two-sided political speaking out of both sides of your mouth thing ever.
It's incredible that you would identify yourself as someone who wants to essentially halt an investigation into a foreign country meddling in our election. I mean, really, you want to put your name on that? That's just disgusting. The move comes just a day after Representative Adam Schiff from California, head Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, told USA Today that the committee should have, quote, 2 or 3 times its current resources for the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. The provision is not guaranteed, by the way, at least DeSantis's. The provision is not guaranteed a vote on the House floor. The House Rules Committee has wide leeway to discard amendments it considers out of order.
Yeah, this is hopefully will be sort of a symbolic amendment that he's putting forward, because that's what happens in Congress. Lots of them do. They don't make it out of the Rules Committee. DeSantis has also in this said that there's not even a crime. So how could we have a special counsel? Well, he's a special counsel. He's not a special prosecutor. And there is a difference there. And so I think when you listen to the way that these things are worded generally, you have to look a little deeper. DeSantis is someone with I mean, he wrote a book called Dreams of Our Founding Fathers, which was like not a parody, but getting by Obama in the era of Obama, which was basically because he wrote the book Dreams of My Father. So it's this political nitpicking that's gone on with DeSantis for a long time.
So this is a symbolic effort, likely a symbolic effort. Like usually when lawmakers go through with these symbolic efforts, it's because they're pandering to their base or it'll make them look good in some way. How does it make someone look good when they're trying to essentially halt an investigation?
And Paul Ryan, the speaker, says this, the last time he talked about Robert Mueller in this investigation, he said he's a good man and he should stay in there and have our support. So he's not gonna have the support of the speaker, but this, Anna, this could, if it sneaks out of the Rules Committee somehow and it gets to the floor of Congress, it's the kind of thing that could get real support from Republicans who want this thing to end. But there are Republicans who don't like the president too, who want to see this continue.
Right, look, if I were a Republican, I would try to be a leader and realize that someone like Donald Trump, I know it's hilarious because we don't see a lot of leadership in Congress right now, but if I were a lawmaker, I would stand up and say, hey, I don't care what the president identifies as. I don't care if he is a staunch conservative Republican. He does not speak for me. He is dangerous and damaging to the country, right? But you don't see that kind of leadership. I mean, you do among some Republican senators, namely the senators who spoke up against Trump during this whole healthcare debate. John McCain has spoken out against him on various occasions. But overall, you see, the polarization playing out. We support our own no matter what, even if they had unlawful dealings with, potentially unlawful dealings with foreign officials. So you might be wondering, why is this such a big deal? I mean, has anything of substance turned up from this Russia investigation? Well, yes, it has, and so I want to get to that. Apparently, the investigation has found an email exchange between Michael Cohen, who's Trump's longtime business advisor, and one of Putin's lieutenants. His name is Dmitry Peskov. And he asked for assistance reviving a Trump deal in Russia. This was a Trump tower to be built in Russia. So let me give you the details on that. Michael Cohen had written to Peskov, over the past few months, I have been working with a company based in Russia regarding the development of a Trump Tower Moscow project in Moscow City. Without getting into lengthy specifics, the communication between our two sides has stalled. He says, as this project is too important, I am hereby requesting your assistance. I respectfully request someone, preferably you, contact me so that I might discuss the specifics as well as arranging meetings with the appropriate individuals. I thank you in advance for your assistance and look forward to hearing from you soon. So obviously that email raised some concerns, and the investigation has led to officials now talking to Cohen and trying to get some clarity on what was going on there. And Cohen told congressional investigators in a statement Monday that he did not recall receiving a response from Peskov or having further contact with Russian government officials about the project. The email addressed to Peskov appeared to have been sent to a general Kremlin press account. Cohen also told congressional investigators that the deal was envisioned as a licensing project in which Trump would have been paid for the use of his name by a Moscow-based developer called IC Expert Investment Co. So there's a lot more to this, including the involvement of Felix Sater, who is a Russian broker involved in this deal, and some of the promises that he made in these exchanges. We'll get to that in a second, but what's your assessment of this, Michael?
Well, the assessment is this is a real story, and this is what you get from real reporting. And listen, we're never going to know. You started by talking about, has anything come from the investigation? Do we know anything from Mueller? No, we weren't supposed to know, and a good investigation means you're not going to know for quite a while. Mueller wants it to be as leak-proof as he can ask for, and he seems to be getting a good deal of adherence to that admonition to not have leaks. But when we hear stories like this, which is coming from reporting outside of the scope of this investigation, this is just more stuff for Mueller to chew on. This isn't something coming from Mueller, and that should be made clear. This is real. This is Donald Trump working as a candidate, having favoritism from Russia, looking for deals that would make him be actually at a conflict of interest as both a candidate and a president and a nominee. So I think this is a serious, serious story. I don't think any of them have not been serious that we've heard from the Washington Post and a lot from the New York Times. I think they're all serious and they all matter, and that's why there's a special counsel working on it.
I think, yeah, there's a special counsel working on it, and you have Republican lawmakers trying to drain the resources from this investigation so it doesn't continue. So let's talk a little bit about what Trump claims he knows and doesn't know. Now, Cohen said that he discussed the deal 3 times with Trump and that Trump signed a letter of intent with the company on October 28th, 2015. He said that Trump company began to solicit designs from architects and discuss financing. Now, in terms of the email that Cohen had sent to Peskov, Trump allegedly didn't know anything about it. He was completely unaware. If you choose to believe him, that's on you. That's what he alleges. But there was something really interesting regarding a broker in this deal by the name of Felix Sater. He's a Russian-American businessman who actually lived in Trump Tower. Let's go to graphic 13. Over email, Sater bragged to Cohen that he could get Putin to assist with the project and that it would help Trump's presidential campaign, according to correspondence submitted to congressional investigators. So here's his exact message. He said, "Our boy can become president of the USA and we can engineer it. It will get all of Putin's team, I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will manage this process." Now, the deal never went through. they say that the project never went through, everything stalled. But these exchanges are important.
This single email is more damning than any other email that anyone has ever read about, from Hillary Clinton, from the DNC, from the RNC. This is serious meat to something that is not supposed to happen in American politics, which is meddling from a foreign country in our election process. And that's what this was inviting. That's what this was suggesting was going on. Whether or not the deal happened, of course, the Trump people are going to say, oh, the deal never happened. The deal never happened. That means nothing. This is all hearsay. And the fact that the deal didn't happen, we know Donald Trump has failed deals. We know that he has deals that don't happen. He's a businessman. He's been a failed and a successful businessman at different times. But what happened in these emails, when you smell a rat, right? This is smelling a rat. And this is why there's an investigation going on, both in Congress and with a special counsel. And this is perfect for that.
So just one final point about Sater, just so you know all the characters that kind of play into this whole story. Sater has a criminal record. He served time in jail in the 1990s after a bar fight, and also pleaded guilty in 1998 to his role in mafia-linked stock fraud. Federal officials have said he then cooperated on various national security and criminal investigations. So you kind of get a sense of who this guy is. I think it's relevant. But one thing that I am concerned about is what just happened with Donald Trump giving a pardon to Sheriff Joe Arpaio, former sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona. He was found in contempt of court, criminal contempt of court. A federal judge found him guilty and he was pardoned. And so some are now speculating that Donald Trump could potentially pardon people like Paul Manafort if they're found in contempt of court for refusing to cooperate with this investigation.
Yeah, he absolutely could. I mean, the president could pardon whoever he wants. Arpaio was pardoned. His crime, besides contempt of court, was violating the constitutional rights of of people on U.S. soil, and that he could pardon someone for that, to me, is really challengeable at the court, in the courts, at the judicial level. Because if you can pardon anybody who violates constitutional rights, that's different than, oh, this guy sold drugs in the 1970s, he served his time and he's done. That's why there are Justice Department recommendations for who should be able to be pardoned, though the president can pardon whoever they want, and any president can. This, what you just pointed out, though, with Sater and Manafort and all these people that he surrounds himself with, and should he pardon? This, Arpaio was a political pardon. This was about, because he's Donald Trump plays low in the game like that. So he knows that the Arizona Senate race is up. He doesn't like Jeff Flake. He wants to stick it to Jeff Flake, and he could get some partisans on his side there for doing it. So I think it was purely political, but it sets a terrible precedent.
Absolutely.
Help us build independent media together. TYTnetwork.com/join.